Hughes's death represents one of anime's most devastating sacrifices, because he gave up not just his life, but his chance to see his beloved daughter Nina grow up, all while discovering the conspiracy that threatened everything he loved. The tragedy of Hugh's sacrifice isn't just that he died, but that he died alone, realizing the truth about the homunculi conspiracy while being unable to warn anyone or protect his family from the dangers he'd uncovered. His final words to his wife, talking about their daughter and their future plans, become unbearably tragic because viewers know he'll never see any of those dreams fulfilled. His sacrifice robbed him of the simple family happiness he treasured most. The phone booth scene, where he tries desperately to warn someone about the conspiracy, while lust approaches, shows a man choosing duty over survival, even knowing that sharing this information will likely cost him everything. Hugh's sacrifice gains extra emotional weight because he wasn't a fighter or a hero. He was just a loving father and loyal friend who stumbled onto something terrible and chose to do the right thing despite the personal cost. The impact on Ed and Al, who lose not just an ally but a father figure, shows how Hugh's sacrifice rippled through everyone who loved him, multiplying the emotional devastation of his choice. What makes this sacrifice perfect is its quiet heroism. Hughes didn't die in battle or save the world directly, but his choice to investigate and attempt to warn others set in motion the events that would eventually save everyone. Jiraiya's sacrifice against pain represents the ultimate teacher, giving everything to ensure his student could succeed where he failed, choosing certain death over the safety of retreat to gather crucial intelligence. The emotional core of Jiraiya's sacrifice comes from his realization that he failed as a teacher with his previous students, watching Nagato become pain while being unable to save him or guide him back to the right path. His decision to stay and fight pain, even after discovering the truth about the Six Paths technique, wasn't about winning. It was about gathering the information that would allow Naruto to succeed where he had failed. The scene where Jiraiya writes his final message in code on Fukasaku's back, using his own blood while his arm is destroyed, shows a man using his last moments to help his student rather than save himself. His final thoughts about Naruto and his belief that his student represents the child of prophecy who will change the world give meaning to his sacrifice. He's not just dying, but passing the torch to the next generation. The way Jiraiya faces death with acceptance rather than fear, thinking about his life's work and the legacy he's leaving behind, transforms his death from tragedy into triumph of the human spirit. Jiraiya's sacrifice becomes even more poignant when Naruto learns the truth, understanding that his teacher died, believing in him, and providing the key to defeating an enemy that seemed invincible. The Going Merry's sacrifice represents one of anime's most unique emotional moments. A ship choosing to give everything to save the crew that loved her, knowing it would be her final voyage. The emotional impact comes from the revelation that ships can develop souls through the love and care of their crews, making Merry not just a vessel but a beloved crew member who had been silently sharing their adventures. Merry's decision to sail to Eni's lobby to rescue the crew, despite her broken keel and deteriorating condition, represents pure love in action. She knew this journey would destroy her, but couldn't bear to let her family face danger alone. The scene where Merry speaks to the crew, thanking them for loving her and asking forgiveness for not being able to carry them further, breaks the fourth wall of emotion by making viewers cry over a ship. Her final words about being happy and asking the crew to smile because their adventures were so wonderful transform her destruction from tragedy into celebration of the bonds they shared. The Viking funeral, where the crew watches Merry burn while sharing their favorite memories, shows how true sacrifice creates beauty even in endings, honoring what was lost while cherishing what remains. Luffy's tears and the crew's grief prove that Merry's sacrifice wasn't just about transportation. She was family, and her choice to save them at the cost of her existence represents the purest form of selfless love. Kamina's sacrifice represents the perfect older brother figure, giving his life to ensure the younger generation could surpass him, choosing to die as a hero rather than live as someone who held others back. The emotional impact of Kamina's death comes from its timing. Just when Simon was beginning to believe in himself and their team was becoming unstoppable, the loss of their inspirational leader threatens to destroy everything they'd built. Kamina's final battle against the gunmen shows him fighting beyond his physical limits, already fatally wounded but refusing to fall until he's ensured Simon and the others can escape and continue their mission. His last words to Simon about believing in the Simon who believes in himself represent the ultimate gift from mentor to student, not just inspiration, but the foundation for self-confidence that will carry Simon through every future challenge. The way Kamina faces death with his characteristic grin and confidence, even while saying goodbye, shows someone who chose how his story would end rather than letting circumstances decide for him. His sacrifice gains meaning through Simon's growth afterward. Kamina didn't just die to save his friends, but to force Simon to become the leader he was always capable of being. The series' later revelations about spiral power and breaking through limitations show that Kamina's sacrifice wasn't just heroic death, but the catalyst that allowed humanity to transcend their limitations and achieve the impossible. Lelouch's sacrifice represents the ultimate strategic mind choosing to destroy his own legacy and reputation to give the world the peace it needed, accepting eternal hatred for the sake of everyone's future. The emotional complexity of Lelouch's sacrifice comes from the realization that everything terrible he did in the series' final season was part of an elaborate plan to make himself so hated that his death would unite the world. His decision to use the Zero Requiem plan meant sacrificing not just his life, but his relationship with everyone he loved. Nunnally, Shirley's memory, and even his own chance to be remembered as anything other than a tyrant. The scene where Nunnally touches his hand and realizes the truth about his sacrifice through her Gias shows the devastating cost of his choice. He died knowing his sister understood, but only in his final moments. Lelouch's tears as he explains his plan to Suzaku show that despite his strategic brilliance, he was still a young man who wanted to live and be happy, making his choice to die for others even more heartbreaking. The way he smiles as he dies, seeing the peaceful world his sacrifices created, transforms his death from tragedy into triumph. He achieved exactly what he planned, even though it cost him everything. His sacrifice continues affecting characters years later, with Suzaku carrying the burden of being Zero and Nunnally building the peaceful world Lelouch died to create, showing how true sacrifice echoes through generations. Nagisa's sacrifice represents a mother choosing to give birth despite knowing it will cost her life, prioritizing her unborn child's future over her own survival in anime's most emotionally devastating family moment. The emotional impact comes from watching Tomoya and Nagisa build their perfect life together, knowing that their happiness is fragile and that the pregnancy that should bring joy will ultimately tear their family apart. Nagisa's decision to continue the pregnancy despite her weak constitution shows incredible courage and love. She chooses to give Ushio life even knowing it means she won't be there to raise her daughter. The scene where Nagisa weakly holds Ushio and asks Tomoya to be a good father before dying shows a mother using her final moments to ensure her child will be loved rather than dwelling on her own fears. Her sacrifice gains additional weight through its aftermath. Tomoya's inability to cope with loss and his abandonment of Ushio shows how one person's heroic choice can have devastating consequences for those left behind. The revelation that Nagisa's love and sacrifice created the miracle that eventually saves both her and Ushio shows how true selflessness can transcend even death, creating possibilities that logic says shouldn't exist. Nagisa's willingness to trust Tomoya with their daughter's future, even knowing he's struggling with grief, represents ultimate faith in the power of love to heal and guide people through impossible circumstances. Portgas D. Ace's sacrifice represents the perfect older brother choosing death over watching his younger brother die, throwing away his own escape to protect Luffy from a fatal attack that was meant for him. The emotional devastation of Ace's death comes from its preventability. He had been successfully rescued and was escaping when Akainu's taunts about Whitebeard made him turn back for a fight that cost him everything. Ace's decision to shield Luffy from Akainu's magma fist represents pure brotherly love in action. In that split second, he chose Luffy's life over his own without hesitation or regret. His final words to Luffy, thanking him for loving him despite his cursed bloodline and asking him to tell everyone he was happy, transform his death from tragedy into gratitude for the bonds that made his life meaningful. The scene where Ace smiles as he dies, surrounded by the family that chose to love him, shows someone finding peace in sacrifice rather than bitterness about what he's losing. His sacrifice gains extra meaning through its impact on Luffy, whose breakdown and subsequent character growth show how Ace's death forced him to become stronger and more protective of his remaining family. The way Whitebeard and the crew honor Ace's sacrifice by ensuring Luffy escapes safely shows how one person's heroic choice can inspire others to make their own sacrifices for worthy causes. Kyoko Sakura's sacrifice represents someone choosing to die with a friend, rather than live in a world where that friend has become lost to despair, showing how love can make even tragedy beautiful. The emotional power of Kyoko's sacrifice comes from her character development. She starts as a selfish, pragmatic, magical girl who only cares about survival, but learns to value others through her friendship with Sayaka. Her decision to use her soul gem to create a massive explosion that will kill both herself and Witch Sayaka represents the ultimate act of mercy. She chooses to join her friend in death rather than destroy her. The scene where Kyoko smiles and says, "I was stupid for believing in you," before the explosion shows someone finding peace in choosing love over logic, even when that choice leads to destruction. Her sacrifice gains meaning through its context in the series' exploration of hope and despair. Kyoko chooses hope by believing that dying together is better than living apart, even in such tragic circumstances. The way her death affects Homura and eventually influences Madoka's own sacrifice shows how one person's choice to prioritize love over survival can inspire others to make similar heroic decisions. Kyoko's sacrifice represents the series' theme that connection and caring for others is worth any cost, even when that caring leads to suffering and loss. The fourth Hokage and his wife's sacrifice represents parents choosing to die together to save their newborn son and their village, using their final moments to give Naruto the love that would sustain him through years of loneliness. The emotional impact comes from watching new parents face an impossible choice. They could potentially survive by abandoning their village, but choose instead to sacrifice themselves to ensure both Konoha and Naruto have a future. Minato's decision to seal the Nine Tails into Naruto rather than simply banishing it shows a father choosing to burden his son with power and responsibility rather than leave the village defenseless against future threats. Kushina's final words to Naruto, telling him about healthy eating and finding love and warning him about women like herself, show a mother trying to compress a lifetime of parental guidance into her last few minutes. Their choice to use the dead demon consuming seal together, allowing them to speak to Naruto one final time, represents parents choosing to give their child closure and love rather than simply saving his life. The scene where they tell Naruto they love him and believe in his future shows parents using their deaths to give their child the emotional foundation he'll need to become the hero they know he can be. Their sacrifice gains additional meaning when Naruto meets their spirits during the war, learning that their love and faith in him has been guiding his choices throughout his entire life. Byakuya Ishigami's sacrifice represents a father spending his entire life creating a legacy that might save his son, choosing to dedicate every remaining moment to ensuring Senku would have the tools needed to rebuild civilization. The emotional power comes from the revelation that Byakuya wasn't Senku's biological father, but chose to love and sacrifice for him anyway, showing how true parenthood is defined by choice and dedication rather than blood. His decision to spend his final years on the International Space Station gathering materials and creating the treasure that would eventually reach Senku shows someone choosing hope over despair in impossible circumstances. The Platinum Ring and his recorded message represent a father's absolute faith in his son's abilities. Byakuya knew that if anyone could rebuild the world, it would be Senku, and he dedicated his life to helping that happen. His sacrifice of a comfortable life on the space station to help establish the village on Treasure Island shows someone choosing the long-term welfare of humanity over personal comfort or survival. The way his message acknowledges that he probably won't live to see Senku again, but expresses pride and love anyway, shows a parent finding peace in knowing their child will succeed even without them. Senku's tears upon hearing the message show how Byakuya's sacrifice provided not just practical help, but emotional support across thousands of years, proving that love can transcend any obstacle. Askeladd's sacrifice represents a complex character choosing to die in a way that would save the place he secretly loved, while ensuring the young man he'd been training could finally find his own path. The emotional complexity of Askeladd's death comes from the revelation of his true motivations. Everything terrible he did was partially motivated by his desire to protect whales and guide Thorfinn toward a better life. His decision to kill King Swain in front of the entire court represents someone choosing certain death to prevent a war that would devastate whales, showing how true patriotism sometimes requires ultimate sacrifice. The way he orchestrates his death to ensure Canute will become king and Thorfinn will be forced to move beyond revenge shows a strategic mind, using its final moments to create the best possible future. His final words to Thorfinn about having no enemies and being a true warrior represent a father figure, using his death to teach the ultimate lesson about finding peace. The scene where he dies, thinking about his Welsh mother, and the stories she told him shows someone finding peace in knowing he honored his heritage, even if he had to become a monster to do it. His sacrifice gains meaning through its aftermath. Canute becomes a wise king. Thorfinn abandons his quest for revenge, and Wales remains protected, showing how one death can create multiple positive outcomes. All Might's sacrifice of one for all and his symbol of peace represents a hero choosing to give up everything that defined him to ensure the next generation could surpass him and create a better world. The emotional impact comes from watching someone who seemed invincible become vulnerable, choosing to pass on his power, knowing it would leave him defenseless against enemies who still wanted to destroy him. His decision to continue fighting all for one, even after losing one for all, shows someone choosing to protect others despite no longer having the power to guarantee victory. The scene where he addresses the world after his retirement, encouraging everyone to become heroes themselves, shows someone using his fall from grace to inspire others rather than dwelling on what he's lost. His sacrifice of his public image and reputation by revealing his true form shows someone choosing honesty and vulnerability over maintaining the facade that made him feel secure. The way he continues mentoring Deku and other students, despite no longer being the symbol of peace, shows someone finding new purpose in teaching, rather than mourning what he can no longer do. All Might's sacrifice represents the theme that true heroism isn't about personal glory or power, but about creating a world where heroes are no longer needed because everyone chooses to help others.